Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Beguiled by Books. I'm Megan, and I've got my July reading wrap up for you today. Let's get started. July went by in a blink. I cannot believe how quickly time passed over the last month. I only ended up reading 6 books in July. That is still a great number, but I have been hitting the 12 to 15 mark pretty consistently this year. So 6 books was significantly fewer than I was expecting. We'll see how many books I can read in August, but in July, there were only 6 books. Let's talk about those books. I think part of the reason I also only read 6 books in July was because the books I read just didn't make me feel things. They didn't spark joy the way I wanted. The first book that I read was Night Bitch, and this one had been on my TBR for a while. I was working on getting through some of those short books, and I decided to go ahead and read it. I had heard it was being adapted into a TV show or movie or something for the screen, and it was fine. It was good. It was weird. I liked that it was told in such a way where there wasn't a ton of dialogue, but the premise of Night Bitch is really about motherhood and kind of that early stage with a toddler. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I just can't relate to that as I am not at that stage in my life. So there were some gaps for me in Night Bitch, but it was really well done, very vivid imagery. And I look forward to seeing it on the screen. The next book I read is All in Her Head, which is a nonfiction book about women and the history of women, not in the medical community as doctors and nurses and things, but as patients, and what the patriarchy kind of has done over generations for women in medicine, and how women are often silenced, and their pain and their experiences as patients are often silenced or diminished. It was a really fascinating book, and I didn't enjoy the stories. No one really enjoys seeing their gender diminished in the medical community, but it was eye-opening is a better way of saying that. So All in Her Head was, like I said, very eye-opening in terms of what women experience, how symptoms are often treated and not the whole person, and how so often comorbidities are occurring and doctors are overlooking those comorbidities for bigger issues because of things like biases, long-standing biases towards women as reproductive vessels. Very interesting look at that type of world. Little heavy. So if you're looking for more of a lighthearted read, maybe not that one right away, but it was really informative and I did enjoy it. Just before my vacation in July, I decided to start The Priory of the Orange Tree. I had it on my Kindle. I didn't have to pack any physical books. And I knew it was a big monster 800-page book that I could read throughout the duration of my vacation. So I started reading a couple days before I left and ended up only reading a handful of chapters while I was actually traveling. And ooh, I wanted to love this book. I wanted to love Priory of the Orange Tree. I have been hearing so many amazing things about it over the years. I really like the author as a person. I think she's very interesting. But I didn't love it. And that's the best way I can say it. Priory felt like the focus was on the mythology and on the world building. The world building, 5 stars, absolutely incredible. Cannot discount that. I didn't love the characters. I really didn't feel anything for the characters. They lacked a depth. They lacked a humanity to me. Um, some of them made choices and kind of got away without any consequences, and that pulls me out. I don't know. There just a lot of the character stuff just fell flat for me. I didn't actually care what happened to them. Again, the world building was phenomenal. The mythologies that were created were phenomenal. The magic system was really interesting, but the characters just, I don't know. I wanted to love it. I don't know if I'll read the sequel or the prequel, Day of Fallen Night, we'll have to see. But for right now, I'm just gonna call it and keep reading. Throughout trying to read Priory, I also started a nonfiction book, Entangled Life. And this book is all about mushrooms and mycology and fungus. And I went full nerd on this book. It's so interesting. I often reflect on my childhood and think about things that I just didn't know were careers, and like how my life could be different had I known the study of mushrooms was a career. I don't know. I doubt I would have done it, but it's still really interesting. Learned so much about mushrooms and fungi and all of the different networks, how those mycelium networks really help plants grow, and how our monoculture world is really killing not just the crops that we're trying to grow in the soil, but these underground networks and how those play into the woods and the forests and other parts that are seemingly unrelated to farmland. Fascinating, fascinating look at this unseen world. And if you are a little bit of a science nerd, I would highly recommend it. Another book I read in July is called The Source, and this one showed up in Instagram several times, and the premise that I saw on Instagram that made me buy it was the neuroscientific reasons behind why the law of attraction and manifestation and kind of that like woo-woo stuff works. And I'm always interested in figuring out the scientific reason behind unscientific notions, philosophies, principles, kind of science of religion and how religion plays into science and those types of seemingly disparate things and why they work so well together. So I was curious to read this book. It was a short, under 300-page book, and it started very strong. I really liked the conversations around neuroplasticity and why positive outlooks and kind of that power of positive thinking really does help rewire neural pathways in your mind. It was really good. Like so many nonfiction books that we just can't, there aren't enough pages to really dive into all these nuances. Things that weren't touched on that I wish I could have gotten a little bit more information on were things like neurodivergence and different chemical receptors in the brain and how those things work. Again, that's a big one. There is a book called Behave by Robert Sapolsky, who's a neuroscientist. That actually gets really in the weeds. It's also an 800-page like neuroscience book, so it's not for the faint of heart. But The Source is a really good primer, I think, if you're interested in kind of the, does manifestation, does the law of attraction actually work? And if so, why does it work in my mind from a science perspective? So for those reasons, it was really interesting. I ended July with a book called The Scent of Burnt Flowers. I picked this up as a blind date with a book at my local bookstore, and it was labeled as magical realism taking place in Ghana in the 1960s. So definitely thought that was a really interesting premise. Haven't read anything like that. Again, this one started strong, but lost me maybe about halfway through. I liked the premise. I liked the main female character, Bernadette. But there wasn't enough time to really make me love the characters. And then there were elements of magical realism that were never explained or thoroughly woven into the story. There was a magical guitar, there was a mermaid, there were multiple mermaids or just one mermaid. It kind of was piecemeal from a narrative perspective, and did not love the ending. It was very open. That is a choice. That is a stylistic choice from the author, and I do not judge that. I just don't love, as a reader, that open ending. I need closure of the story unless there's going to be a sequel. I think this is a standalone novel. I don't think there's going to be a sequel. I don't love feeling unfinished when I watch a movie or read a book or anything like that. So that's my diatribe on The Scent of Burnt Flowers. But it was really cool in the sense that it takes place in Ghana. It was a very different view of a historical fiction novel, and I really loved that element. That geopolitical piece of it was really, really neat. But the other parts were kind of confusing and distracted me from what I thought was cool. So those were my 6 books that I read in July. What did you read in July? What should I read in August and September? I am constantly on the hunt for new books. Please drop your comments below. And as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Have a great day.